realize that what I'm about to talk about is A, probably not going to convince anybody, and B, really outdated, but I still think it's worth talking about, if only because every subsequent rant, I think I'm going to accidentally end up mentioning this game just because it's very good at certain things. And I honestly believe, as fantastic as 2008 was, as many incredible games as we got out of it, I think the one that made me think more than any of the others is probably Far Cry 2. I think Far Cry 2's design represents one of the most interesting steps forward in finding a way to combine non-linear open-world gameplay with some semblance of an engaging story that I've ever seen. And by the story, I don't mean the actual overarching narrative of finding the jackal, because that story usually occurs via a lot of linear scripted moments that don't allow you to do the things that you might well really want to do, but via the buddy system. The basic buddy system is you choose one from one of these 9 characters, and the other 8 characters that you don't choose end up in the world helping you as buddies. They either ask you to do missions, or if you get injured, they come and help you and pick you up. And you basically need them to survive, because if you do their missions for them, then you get new like shit at your hideouts, and if you need buddies to like you, so that if you fall in battle, they'll pick you up and save you, and basically make it so you don't have to load a game again. And the buddies can mean whatever they want to you, and you get to decide how to deal with them, and the consequences of those decisions are permanent. I mean, they all have actual like personalities and things they say, and they're not thrust upon you in the sense of like there's a lot of really long cutscenes. They just talk, and you sort of get a sense of their personality just from being around them or doing their missions or fighting with them. So if you've got a guy whose personality you really liked, and he's dying in front of you, and you've only got one morphine syringe left that you might need to get back to town in safety, I mean, what do you do? Do you leave him to die, or do you sacrifice your last remaining syringe to make sure that this guy lives and can help you again? Or maybe it's just because you like him. It's basically up to you how you feel about these guys. Similarly, if someone really, really irritates you, do you string them along and make sure that they're the ones who are going to be able to save you, and the second you're tired of them, you just either leave them to die, or you just shoot them, or do whatever? These guys have just enough character and just enough of an impact on your overall gameplay style that they feel like story elements because they have personalities, without actually being as rigid and unmoving as story elements tend to be in video games. You can't just turn around in Prince of Persia and kill off Elika even if you really, really want to. But Far Cry 2 allows you that choice at any time you want, and interesting moral and gameplay based dilemmas arise naturally out of that buddy system. And even ignoring the buddy system, I've replayed Far Cry 2 as many times as I have. I think about 6, which is actually kind of sad just for me. But I've played it as many times as I've had because it has a really solid first person shooter mechanic structure that has completely different implications when you put it in this persistent, somewhat well realized world that you can tackle in numerous different ways. I mean, in most shooters, different types of gameplay are broken up into discrete and separate levels. So, like in Resident Evil 4, you'll have a level where you're in a big village full of houses and you got to defend yourself in that urban environment, and then you'll have a level where you're being chased by a bunch of people through an open field, and then you'll have a level where you snipe at people from a distance, and they're all very discrete. All those levels have been specifically tailored to highlight those specific aspects of the gameplay and the mechanics because they want you to feel a very specific arc of emotions when you play through the game in its entirety. The designer has predetermined what emotions you should feel and when you go through this campaign. In Far Cry 2, you get to determine most of that for yourself. Nearly every mission area is designed in such a way that you can attack it from any perspective you like. If you feel like a sniping mission, if you feel like it's time to just do that, then you find a high vantage point and you snipe from a distance, and then you go down and do whatever objective. If you feel like going in guns blazing, there's probably enough cover for you to do that. If you feel like just running in, doing what you've got to do, and then running out and not really killing as many people, just being a not a pussy, but just someone who focuses more on escaping than actually killing people, you can do that as well and get chased, and it'll be exciting. To some degree, you actually get to design your own experience as you progress through the game, and express yourself within those mechanics depending on what you want to do. And the world you inhabit has such texture and such believability to it that the whole experience feels that much more immersive and satisfying at times. The buddies add texture and depth. The fire system, where you can basically isolate enemies by surrounding them in flame by throwing Molotov cocktails, that adds depth. The feeling of pointing a gun at a dude's head and having your weapon suddenly jam on you, and then trying to figure out what to do next, that adds depth. I mean, there's a lot of irritating shit in Far Cry 2, like the respawning guard posts and the malaria and the really long driving times and all that stuff. But the good stuff there is really good, and it makes the game feel more immersive and satisfying than damn near any other non-linear game I've played. And especially when you combine it with those underlying solid first-person shooter mechanics. There's actually a sort of movement going on right now within the hardcore Far Cry 2 fan community, where people are trying to play through the game by self-imposing permanent death, where they'll wipe their save if they get killed. And I think it came out of a discussion that Clint Hawking had about like permanent death, the creative director, on his blog. But I mean, I think it's a real testament to the immersiveness of the world of Far Cry 2 that not only do its systems make people want to try that kind of stuff to make it feel more realistic and more consequential, but because the game actually sort of holds up to that sort of gameplay, apart from random truck deaths where you get hit by a truck that you didn't see. Going back to something I talked about last week, Far Cry 2 is a step. It's a very small step, but it's a very important step toward that sort of truly nonlinear, systemic, player-driven experience that Suitcode Avenger wanted with his Punisher game idea, that so many other people want with their zombie apocalypse game ideas, or your non-linear Western shooter ideas, or anything that we assume games should be. It's just you in this world with some base mechanics that can give rise to some diverse strategies and situations, and then you just let go to solve problems in most, for the most part, any way you want to within these restrictions of it's you can't talk things out with people, you have to kill them, but still within that you have some freedom. And I mean, Far Cry 2 is technically sort of a failure at what it initially wanted to be, which is a more deliberate and deep experience. I mean, if you're really interested in what the game was trying to be initially, what the original design was, check out the GDC presentations about it by Clint Hawking or Patrick Redding. But I mean, even as the failure as it is, even without the really complex methods of dealing with the factions, or an infamy system that subtly rewards you for evil and forces you to re-examine your own morality, it still shows the strategic, immersive strength of building an interesting system and letting the player dick around in it in a way they want to, rather than forcing them through a series of meticulously designed events that affect every player in the exact same way. If nothing else, Far Cry 2's successes and failures act like a signpost to me, pointing down this really seldom explored road, saying, hey, there's something really interesting and unique here, and maybe we should explore it further, not just through incredibly obtuse, dense games that you have to have a PhD in understanding, like Dwarf Fortress, but through very intuitive, very, very familiar stuff like a first person shooter. That can be interesting in this way as well. And maybe Far Cry 2 wasn't this industry shaking thing that made every game in the world realize the merits of its basic design philosophies, but it gives you just a glimmer of the majesty that could be had if you took those ideas and refined them or took them further or whatever. I'm fucking praying for a sequel, personally, because I really like what they tried and began to do. That's all I've got for this week. If you want to send me an email, send me at reverandanthony@gmail.com, and I will talk to you next week.